We may have some late joining. My name is Hannah Morell. I'm with Pacific Stoa Financial Coaching. I'm a holistic financial coach. I'll talk a little bit about what that actually means here in a second. Don't worry, we're probably not going to be talking about money at all today, maybe just a tiny little bit. Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, I should say. I'm being very Pacific Northwest specific and centrist. Sorry for those of you who aren't abroad, are here in the Pacific Northwest. For those of you, if anybody is a client, you should not feel obligated to let anybody else know that you're a client. So you can go ahead and we can keep that confidential if you like. So the purpose of today's class is we're going to be talking about restriction a lot. I would really like it if this was a discussion and less of a class. It gets real boring if it's just me talking. So I want to encourage you folks to interrupt me, especially once I go to slides. I won't be able to see chat very well. So this is your class too. So I'm going to encourage you to go camera on, and you can unmute yourself if you feel like talking. And just to practice that, I'm going to talk for a little bit, and I would like anybody to interrupt me. So let's do that. So my cat, his name is Tank. He is about 17, 18 years old. He has dementia. He's entirely blind, even though he has one eye. He has got multiple medical issues, and he is extremely sassy. I'm going to say sassy. I don't know, at some point today, you'll hear him screaming. I'm tucked away in the bedroom, so he can't get to me, but yeah, he'll yell a little bit. He yells at night. I have a sign in my front door that lets my neighbors know that he's okay and that they can talk to him through the window if they want. I'm seriously going to keep talking until somebody interrupts me. But yeah, Tank is this weird, lovely little intersection between being grouchy and snuggly at the same time. I didn't even think that was possible. And he's the only cat I've ever had that literally gives hugs. So he'll wrap his front paws around you and pull himself into your neck. I'm going to keep talking until somebody interrupts me.
Hannah, it's Kathleen.
Hi, Kathleen. Hi, Kathleen. Hi. Thank you.
I was waiting for you to tell about the hugging. It's important.
The hug, you wanted me to tell about the hugging?
It was important to talk about the hugging in the cat. So I'm interrupting you and thanking you for sharing that.
Thank you. So there you saw Kathleen interrupt. Did Kathleen die? No, she didn't. Kathleen is fine. So it is totally okay to interrupt. If I'm the only one talking, please interrupt. Somebody else is talking and you have something to add, share, ask, say, something like that. Please just put your hand up, or like chat is probably going to be the last place that I'll check. But hi, Jack. You're going to play online chess. Miriam doesn't have a silly thing for us, but I'm sure you're thinking about one. So before we really kick into the class, I want to do a land acknowledgement. So I think it's important to recognize that we are all on native lands. Personally, I am on Kalapuya land right now, and I'm grateful to be able to live, work, and learn on their land. Let's see, other housekeeping stuff. It's an hour-and-a-half session today. We'll take a break about halfway through. There'll be time at the end for question and answer, but don't hold back. And there'll be time if you want to take a short quiz to talk about a quiz from the class today if you want a certificate of completion. It's pretty easy. Okay, so let me see if I forgot anything else, but I think we're okay. Let's go ahead and switch over to slides. One moment. All right. Let me get my screen organized here. Lovely. So this class is for case managers, research navigators, community leaders, teachers, mentors, coaches, do-gooders, advocates, but it's also for you. So whether you are here for your own development or here in service of the people that you serve, you can take away from this class both. And that is my intention with this. You'll hear me kind of flipping back and forth. This is a train the trainer class, but this is one of the first times that I've ever opened this up to the wider normal people community. So this has been available for people who to sign up who are not case managers and navigators and people like that. So my hope is that you take something away from this for yourself that you can also duplicate out to those that you serve. At Pacific Store, we have 3 core values. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into each of these as well. We teach others to trust themselves. We respect others' inherent resilience, and we foster autonomy and self-reliance. So what does it mean to teach others to trust themselves? Inconsistencies, both internal, so the inconsistencies that we generate, and external, the ones that the world and other human beings generate for us, reinforce the message that we cannot trust ourselves. We recognize that there are very few tools that intentionally teach people to trust themselves, and we work to develop and teach adaptive, trauma-informed strategies that teach self-trust. We respect others' inherent resilience. There is no difference between being able to trust yourself and being resilient. I think that is an important message that we don't hear enough. If you can trust yourself, if the people that you serve can trust themselves, if they know that they've always got their own back, they are naturally resilient. We recognize that everyone we serve has everything that they need to get from where they are to where they want to go. Our purpose is to simply teach, coach, and accept people where they are, and then get the hell out of their way. I should have mentioned that there is an occasional swear word. My swearing is not intended to offend anybody, although I realize that it might, especially when we talk about like the way that people talk. There's sometimes swearing, so I apologize. And that's the last apology for swearing. We foster autonomy and self-reliance. Once those we serve are practiced in resilience and the ability to be aware of their behaviors without judgment, and that is an important key, without judgment, they are naturally self-reliant. We recognize for a time those that we serve are, quote unquote, borrowing our confidence in them. We are honored to reflect and model acceptance, positive regard, and respect. So class objectives, my intention is that you'll take away from this a deep understanding of why we use restriction as a decision-making tool, and also why it is not an adaptive tool and maybe counterproductive. I hedge that. That should be, it's absolutely counterproductive. I'll teach you one quick win tool, which is just a game that you can reteach, and a longer term concept that you can reteach as well. So just a moment, I need tea before I talk about this little guy. So at some point in your childhood, you didn't want to transition from one activity to another. You didn't want to get in the car, let's say. And your exquisitely frustrated parent who has more power than you and is bigger and stronger than you. And really, we don't want to think too badly about parents. This parent probably had things to do that day that weren't involved with you carrying on. So at some point, your parent picked you up and bodily chucked you in the back of a car or another conveyance. And we're using a 1970s Plymouth Fury here because I specifically recall being picked up and chucked into the back of a Plymouth Fury in the 70s because I was not moving as quickly as I should have, and probably taking too long, and probably throwing a big fat fit, because that's what I did. So this happens to all of us in childhood at some point. If it's not our parents, it's something else that happens. So we learn in a time in our lives that we should be learning how to regulate ourselves. The message we got instead was that the only way I can get things done is to be forced. And again, we're not picking on parents, right? Everybody's got like a schedule to keep, and children are little psychopaths sometimes. Well, at least I was. So they're only using the tools that they've been given, parents. So yeah, that was the tool that my parents had, was to check me unseat belted in the back of a Plymouth Fury. We get that messaging that the only way I can get anything done, the only way I can be productive or responsible or whatever, is to force myself to do it, or force an outside force to force me to do that. Those too many forces. We have lots of data to support this. We can think back to lots and lots of times in our lives when we did not meet expectations and needed to be forced into that. Our brains remember that well and vividly, right? Like, I'm 50. I can go back 40 years in time and tell you about a whole bunch of times that I needed to be forced, obligated, or restricted into doing something or not doing something. And I think probably most of you can too. Our brains are great about thinking about the past. And because restriction is the only tool that we've ever been given, it's of course the only tool that we can use. Restriction goes by bunches of different names. Force, limitations, obligation, accountability, control, also responsibility, duty, that kind of a thing. I'm going to try to limit my language to restriction. I'll probably fold in obligation occasionally too. They are totally different concepts, but I'm sort of trying to like simplify things for our class today. So I'm going to try to say it's restriction instead of all these other things. We'll see how I do. Yeah, so we're going to kind of collapse them all together into just restriction. What it sounds like, so when I'm working with clients, what it sounds like, how I know somebody's using restriction or obligation is they're going to say things like this: I just need to, we just have to buckle down. I don't have a choice, do I? Like, they could talk to themselves and say, you don't, I don't have a choice, or use my own name. I can say, Hannah, you just don't have a choice. I have to. I'm only focused on X right now. Well, we're not going to talk about this too much, but that last one, the I'm only focused on X right now, hyper focus, kind of seems like it should be a good thing, and it's actually not a great thing. Hyper focus is, got someone coming in. Sorry, folks, just a moment. Okay. The hyper focus, if I'm only focused on this right now, is actually a form of avoidance. So it's actually, I'm focused on this one thing right now at the exclusion of everything else that I need to be keeping my head on a swivel for. So I can't see emergencies coming at me. I also can't see good things. So that will probably be something we'll talk about in another class. I just want to make sure that we're really understanding I'm only focused on this right now can sometimes seem like a good thing, but can actually be kind of poisonous. So what does restriction do to our little brains? We're going to talk about something called the consent continuum. And I've stolen this from the world of like social workers, therapists and counselors who work in populations that are not necessarily meeting with that professional because they want to. So this would be like incarcerated people, juvenile detention, stuff like that. Also, people who are working with a population that have to meet with them, so that they have to meet with social worker to get a resource. So they're, in order to get housing or something. And the reason that they teach this and they talk about consent so much is because there is an expectation of a certain kind of behavior. Consent gets talked about right now and should be talked about in terms of sex. But there's an entire continuum off of consent. There is only one true form of consent, and that is here in green for us. Consent is freely given, it's revocable, it's informed, and it's a couple other things. It is, we are making a decision or engaging in an activity with the full knowledge of the consequences, processes, risks, and values. If you take one step off of pure consent, you get into compliance. So compliance is where somebody is engaging in activity reluctantly. So they're still doing that activity, whatever it may be, but they're doing it in order to please or not disappoint. This is still not consent. It is anything that's outside of that green bubble is not consent. Although the person is still engaging in the activity, that is not to be confused with consent. So I occasionally hear this from my clients, and I absolutely expect it, that for a little while, as I'm beginning to work with my clients, they're doing what I ask them to do in order to not disappoint me. And I understand that it's part of the process of our kind of them attaching to me, and then they will naturally sort of detach from me because I'm not needed anymore. I do not compel my clients at all. So they choose their own homework. They choose, like when we meet next, everything is full of choice for them. But there is a vestigial sort of connection that they think that they need to hold themselves accountable to me, even though that's all from them. But it falls off as they learn to trust themselves, as they gain resilience, as they prove to themselves over and over and over again that they can do that. Their need to feel compliant to me drops off. So I expect it. I don't typically bring it up. They sometimes do, but I just let them know exactly what I told you. It's expected and it falls away. Take one step to the right of compliance, then you're getting into pressure. So this is, again, someone is engaging in activity or action through the use of bribery, punishment, shame, judgment, manipulation, implied threats, or sense of duty. And I sometimes get pushback right here. Like, I have a duty to my family, to my job, to my community. Does that mean, Hannah, that you're saying that I shouldn't do those things? No, absolutely not. It's just important to understand that we are doing these things from a place of feeling pressured. And again, it doesn't matter whether we're pressuring ourselves or we're feeling pressure from the outside world, it's all the same. Take one more step to the right, and we were getting into coercion. So this is where someone is engaging in activity, but they are not giving their permission. They are still engaging in that activity through the use of bribery or punishment, direct threats of violence or physical harm. One more step to the right, and we've got force, and this is waterboarding, but it is also chucking 4-year-old Hannah into the back of a car, right? So this is a person engaging in activity without giving permission through the act of physical violence or harm. I was not harmed, by the way, just to make that super clear. I was a hell of a child. So the reason that they teach this, the concept of this continuum in environments where the professional is working with somebody who's not, it's not their choice to be there, is because as you move from left to right, there's an expectation that certain behaviors are going to happen. And those behaviors are rebellion and resentment. And I want to make it super clear that rebellion and resentment are not personality defects. And they're not a choice. A healthy, well-functioning brain, human brain, when it has choice removed from it, will be rebellious and resentful. You can imagine 4-year-old Hannah unbelted in the back of a Plymouth Fury in, let's say, 1976, was pretty rebellious and resentful, right? That is my brain functioning normally. So I want to make this super clear. When I'm working with service agencies and nonprofits, one of the things that I hear is like, we are giving them a budget sheet and they are not doing it. And that's a form of rebellion. How do you get people to do that? Hannah, how do you make people do their budgets? I'm like, I don't, right? Because I'm building choice in instead of taking it away. So as we are compelled, pressured, coerced, and forced, we will rebel and be resentful. Let's think about a diet. Like I had that original picture with the plate with the snap pea and a tomato on it. Like, that is us restricting our food. And it can work for a while. And then it doesn't work anymore. And you eat the whole cheesecake, right? That's the rebellion. That is expected. That is our brains functioning normally. I know I'm belaboring this, but it's super important. They also expect to see certain behaviors come down or certain capacities reduce. The ability for long-term positive behavior change drops dramatically as you move from left to right. The ability for someone to keep themselves motivated, on track, on task also drops. Their sense of having choice or being able to take advantage of choice, if it's available to them, also drops, which immediately removes a person's sense of themselves. So it destroys their sense of autonomy. So that's why within the Pacific Stoa curriculum, we relabeled this the choice continuum. And this is me just basically drilling into the people that I teach and the people that I serve. We build in choices for people, right? We don't take choices away. One last thing, as you go from left to right, that red line going up, there is one more thing that you can pretty much expect, and that's trauma. And this is a place where human beings are fantastic. We can traumatize and re-traumatize ourselves. We hardly need the outside world for that. And this is one of the places that we can do that. So whether you are coming at from like an organizational standpoint and you're forcing people into something, I'm not saying you do this, by the way. I'm just saying we all know organizations that do that, like you're coercing or pressuring or forcing. You can expect rebellion and resentment, but you can also expect trauma there too. But we can do that to ourselves. We're perfectly capable of doing it. So next picture coming up has some implied animal violence. If any of you have been on another class, I show this picture a lot. So this is our friend, the hyena here in the middle, surrounded by 5 wild dogs. So I'm gonna pull up chat real quick because I want to see you can either unmute yourself or you can fill up the chat for me. But what in this picture is removing choice from the hyena? Chloe says back against the wall. Indeed, that mud bake back there, it's on its own. Della says it's definitely outnumbered. Yep. Location. Yep. Yeah. Scared to death, Susan. Susan says fear of loss of life. Yes, indeed. What are some things that are removing choice from the wild dogs? Hunger, need. Dogs definitely ate all the food in the area. Jack says, yeah. There's also a pack mentality too, right? Like wild dog number 2 couldn't just go, don't feel like killing this hyena today. See you guys. They have more choices. They do. Dogs are smaller in size. Yep. So one-on-one, they probably, if it was one hyena versus one wild dog would be totally different, but yeah. So lots of things in our environments remove choice from us. And I am almost certain that you've had people come to you. I'll back up. I jumped ahead. So to this hyena's brain, with these limited choice and control, that is perceived in our brains as a threat. And any immediate threat will be perceived as limited choice or control. There's a part of that hyena's brain that's very similar to a part of our brain. A very back part of our brains called the R complex, which is incredibly old and is not worried about logical thought, right? This hyena or someone who's drowning is not capable of doing long division. It shouldn't be, right? There's no need for that. This isn't even an emotion. This is sub-emotion, sub-logical. This is pure survival. This part of our brains is survival obsessed and is constantly threat assessing. And as advanced as we think we are, our brains are still constantly threat assessing. I work with couples a lot, and one of the things that we talk about is the things that they do to protect themselves can be perceived as a threat by their partner. So even if the people around us are not trying to threaten us, the things that they do to protect themselves can be perceived as a threat. Go one layer more weird than that, and the things that we do to protect ourselves can be perceived as a threat to ourselves because we're complex and weird. So what I want to make clear here is that this is not a choice. People can't really opt out of feeling out of control. It's not a choice that they can turn off, right? This is threat detection and survival, and that's what crisis is. That's what trauma is. So I'm pretty sure you've had somebody come into your life, personally or professionally, and say something along the lines of, I feel like my life is out of control. And the conventional wisdom that we give or have heard or we have around us in messaging all throughout our society is you need to do X, Y, Z, right? So here the hyena is saying, I feel like my life is out of control. And now the wild dogs are support, right? Like they're coming at the hyena with supportive things. Let's work on your SMART goals, one wild dog says. By the way, I have a very big beef with SMART goals. We don't need to talk about that now, but we can talk about it later if you want to. Focus on what's important, says another wild dog. Read this book, stick to your budget, work harder, right? So all of these things coming at hyena, even if they're motivated by a beautiful place of wanting to help, how is this conventional wisdom perceived by the hyena? Hmm. That the wild dogs are lacking empathy, Stephanie? Yeah. It's like, you're not listening to me, right? You're not understanding. You don't get it. Now's not the best time for such advice, says Jack. It's overwhelming, says Cassie, right? And I want to be super clear. I know that it's motivated by the right things, right? Like this, the world of motivational interviewing calls this the writing reflex, the urge to fix or help people just fix is motivated by something beautiful. But to the person that we are trying to help, it is overwhelming, it is isolating, it is threatening, right? It is further removing choice and control from the person that we are trying to serve. And even without that, right? Even without somebody else coming at us, we do this to ourselves. I just need to work harder. We just need to actually stick to this budget. I just need to work smarter. I also have a beef with I just work smarter, not harder. I have beef with lots of things. I just need to buckle down, right? I just need to stop making stupid choices, right? Same exact sort of messaging that we can repeat to ourselves without anybody else doing that for us. So I hear you saying, Hannah, okay, cool. Then why do we even do this, right? There must be a purpose to this. And there is. Restriction comes along with a pretty convincing sales pitch, right? Yeah, just what you needed, our sleazy sales guy says. So we're going to break up into groups here in a second. And what we're going to be talking about is the sales pitch that restriction is using. I'm going to give you two prompts. What is restriction sales pitch? So what is it telling it's going to help you do? Like, what is it going to help you accomplish? That's one. And then the second one is, what is restriction trying to protect you from? So we'll break into groups here in a second. As soon as I can get over here. They'll be fairly small groups. Come on. I will send those 2 prompts into the groups when we're done. Let's take about 5 minutes. At about a minute in, I will ask you I'll give you the warning at about a minute till breakout rooms. Okay, off you go to breakout rooms. Welcome back. You're welcome to stay on video if you like. We'll be chatting for a little bit. Welcome. Okay. So what do you guys think? What are some of restriction's sales pitches? What does restriction tell us it's going to do for us?
We came up with sort of it helps provide a little bit of structure, you know, for people who are already stressed and like maybe they've overspent, or they might make these rules for themselves about like, I'm just not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. And if I just get that, you know, if I just stick to these rules, it'll be fine. And I think structure in general helps people who are stressed about anything.
Yeah. There's some other sales pitchy things that restriction tells us. Maria?
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Maria.
Do we have two Marias or are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you.
Are you talking to me?
Gonna go.
Not gonna lie, didn't understand the question. I told everybody
Okay.
that, so I let everybody else go because I was a little confused.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about that.
About being confused?
Yeah, what about my prompts was confusing?
State it again.
What about my prompts was confusing?
not
Did it not
that.
track? Okay.
Give me the prompt again and I'll tell you what
The prompts were what does restriction tell us it's going to do for us, like help us accomplish. And the other prompt was, what is restriction trying to protect us from?
You know, I mean, in terms of what does restriction try to protect us from? Is it trying to protect us or is it trying to protect the person who's putting the restrictions? I guess that's my first question.
Okay. That's a good clarification I should have made. So I was using you as if you are restricting yourself. So let's do that. We have to kind of personalize this first before we can do this with anybody else. So for you humans here in this Zoom meeting, not you trying to restrict somebody else, you trying to restrict you, or I'm going to make this way too complicated, I think. Why do most people use restriction? So we can, it's not like I'm going to keep these two entities separate. You restricting yourself, other people restricting themselves, not you, I'm not asking why specifically Maria restricts other people. That's not what I'm asking. So I'm not making this any clearer, am I, Maria?
Not really, but wait a minute, hold on. But hold on, you know, I'm nothing if not honest because I figure
I appreciate that. I thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you know, I figure I've got nothing to lose. So what I'm trying to understand is it's a sales pitch that I'm giving to myself in which I am including some restrictions in order for to benefit myself in some way. Give me an example. Give me an example.
Let's do this. All right. I want all of you guys to think about a little demon, a little monster, right? This little monster's name is restriction. This little monster is sitting on your shoulders and it's saying things like, you just got to buckle down and just got to stick to the plan and you just got to stop doing that. And like, it's just, that's his whole job. Like, it's just going to beat you over the head over and over again.
And then my sales pitch and this little dude's sales pitch to me is, if you do that, you're going to benefit it in this way. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes. Right. So he says like, I'm the only way you're going to get shit done. Right. I'm the only way you're going to be productive. Right. I'm the only way that you're going to be responsible and accountable. I'm the only tool you have. Right.
Right.
I'm also going to protect you from things. I'm going to protect you from
yourself.
Laziness.
Myself.
Right. From you, because you don't know how to do this. You can't trust yourself. We've proven this to ourselves. Right. So the little monster is beating you about the head and telling you it's doing you a favor. Right.
Right.
So is that helping, Maria? Is the cartoons?
Yeah, it totally is helping because it's putting the whole thing into perspective in terms of what you know, what I'm supposed to be thinking about in trying to process this prompt, you know. So like, and I'm gonna go with let's say, because we don't want to talk about money right now, let's talk about my diet, you know, like don't eat this because, you know, Oh, and I give myself a variety of reasons why, because it's going to give you a stomach ache, because, you know, it's going to make you not feel good later, because the obvious reason, because you don't need it, because you're going to keep gaining weight, because, you know, yada, yada, yada. And it's all kind of, yeah. I feel like it all kind of beats me down.
It does. That's what it does. That's what restriction does. Well, and I want to like pause for a second and thank Maria exclusively for this, is because I teach the little monster guy to my clients and had a slide for that. But I took the slide out because I was like, that's too silly. They're not gonna resonate with it. That was the one that we needed.
Anna?
What I typically, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I have to say that. I know you wanted to be interrupted, but
I did. Go for
restrictions, are restrictions always 100% bad?
Oh, I hate this question. I'm gonna say yes, and here's why. It's because they are not the only way that we can get what we want. They are not even the best way. The problem with it is, and why people ask me that exact question, is because this is the only tool we've been given. We've been trying really hard to do it right? And there's like this lie around like, the restriction isn't the problem. You're just not doing it right. And I think that that's where the question of like, can it be good sometimes? Like, if I get it right, like occasionally it does work, right? 4-year-old Hannah getting chucked into the back of the car, that level of restriction absolutely did work so that we could get on with our day. Like me restricting diet's a fantastic one. Thank you, Maria. The restricting the diet does work for a little while, but restriction almost always in a healthy and functioning brain results in rebellion and resentment. And that registers as failure. So the question is like,
can I ask Jack, can you talk about a little bit about what you talked about in our group? Because I think that he made a really good point, you know, and I think that that's the reason why I think to reinforce, Hannah, what you're saying about a restriction not working. Jack, do you mind?
No. Well, I brought up 2 thoughts I had about restriction. Is one, from my personal experience of, I grew up in a neighborhood where it was, I went to Catholic school for 12 years, long story short, and Catholicism is a way, of using a lot of restriction and making you feel guilty or shame for doing different things. And they moralize restriction, like if you restrict yourself in these ways, you'll be a better person. And so I have issues with that. But then I talked about also more so for specifically clients that we help out that are restricted from a societal standpoint, whether it's from like systemic racism, like they have restricted resources. And society tells them in a way, indirectly or directly, that they're not worth the resources that other people are, kind of. But I didn't think that's what the restriction, the second type of restriction I'm talking about, I didn't think was what you're asking about, but it just came to mind.
It should come to mind, right? It's all the same, like the systemic restriction that we have all around us, that we have limited control over. And that's where you can expect the rebellion and the resentment, and you can expect people feeling in crisis and feeling traumatized. If that pattern does nothing else but to help us, like even saying to the person, you are being restricted. It would be weird if you weren't frustrated, overwhelmed, upset, hurt, traumatized, right? If we can just normalize that for people, that all by itself, although we have done nothing to mitigate the restriction itself, that all by itself can help someone take a little breath out of their crisis, right? Like and we can teach them tools to help them heal their own ability, their own instinct to restrict as well, because it is all the way through. We won't hit this too much, but it is deeply wound into religion. And there's an actual, I don't want to get into the stuff we'll talk about next month too much, but there's something called the sunk cost fallacy that restriction uses, that hyper restrictive environments use. I'm trying not to bag on religion too much, but we know what we're talking about, right? Like it leverages it, it is intentional, and it tells us the lie that you've already given up so much, you've already restricted yourself, it's already cost you so much, therefore it must have value. And that is built into the little demon smacking us on the head, right? That is part of it. There's almost a fetishization of restriction in our world. And that's where, like, and I don't know that I actually ever answered Stephanie's question, but that's kind of like where that comes from. Like, how could we make this work for us is part of the gaslighting that goes along with this level of restriction. So that's why my fast and dirty answer to Stephanie is like, can a restriction ever be a good thing? My answer is no. My answer is that there are other tools available to us to do all of the things, to have structure, to have responsibility, to be productive without the negative outcomes that come along with restriction. Yeah. Have I answered any questions? Go, Kathleen.
I don't know how to put this succinctly, but I'm doing a therapy. I've talked to Hannah already about this, called internal family systems, that looks at our psychology as being multiple sub-personalities. And when I look at, and I do a practice that checks in with my internal system that has different parts. And when I'm hearing this conversation, I see I've worked myself with restriction parts internally. And the philosophy or the idea in this internal family system is that all parts have a role. And their intention is positive. The impact might not be positive. It fits exactly with what Hannah is saying in terms of like if I were to work with a client or somebody and I find myself, I mean, I don't do that right now, but I find myself like giving advice and all that, like I can check in with that advice part and say, what do you want me to know? Like, what is the intention? What is the role of that part? And so this question of whether restriction is always bad, I guess I personally wouldn't use the word bad. I would I would say that it has a role and it makes sense to our system because we are conditioned to do it this way. Either from our culture or our family or just our personal proclivities.
Right, just the way that we're wired. And we are pushing right up against something right here. And I think this is important, is that the little demon guy smacking us in the head and using restriction is not going to stop until that need is satisfied, right? So, and we're going to go to break here in a minute. What we'll come back from the break with is like the actual outcomes of that. And how like this gets into its own little cycle. Like the little demon guy with its really convincing sales pitch is using the negative outcomes as more sales pitch. You just need to restrict harder or better or faster, right? And that is like, I don't know if you've ever been around a narcissist, but that's gaslighting, that's moving the goalposts, that's all of those things. So restriction and pushing back again gently with much love, it's not good, right? It may be indicating something, so we can use it as an indicator.
Yeah.
But there are other ways to get the same way. So like, let's say I learn more adaptive ways to be productive and get things done and keep to my schedule and have structure, right? The need for the restriction fades, so does the little demon guy, right? So we're satisfying the need, not satisfying the demon. Is that making any more sense? Okay, we're way overdue on a break. I'm going to stay right here for a break. Let's take 5 minutes, go take a break. do whatever you need to do. When you come back, let's talk about one thing that you need clarification on before we move on.
So does this mean you're staying in case we,
Have a question where you want to yell at me? Yeah, absolutely.
definitely don't want to yell at you for sure. I just,
Yeah,
it's,
absolutely.
they're concepts that are, I think that they're concepts that are so far outside the bounds of what we've been taught.
Yep.
And I know that you don't want to touch on religion. I'm hoping I can explain all of this, but, you know, I was reading an article recently about Holland and Jeff Bezos wanting to have a bridge, get a permit to have a bridge that is actually a historical landmark, like temporarily dismantled so that they could get his yacht, his new, you know, $500 million yacht, right? Yeah, and so like there's huge protests about it, and it's because the Dutch they have a very different mentality than we do, because their land is built on, you know, or their country is built on basically, you know, a system of dikes.
Seafloor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a cooperative sort of collective sort of mentality that they have that Americans don't have, you know?
Yes.
So people just went freaking bonkers, and we're gonna like egg his yacht as it went. So, but they were talking about where it was that they're sort of their a lot of their stuff is rooted in Calvinism, even though today most Dutch are not religious, you know. So
Right.
and I think that that's one of the things that Americans don't necessarily realize, is that religion is, even if we're not religious, this country was founded on, you know.
It's all in, it's in everything.
It's in everything, and we don't realize it, you know. So
Yeah.
we do have a tendency to feel guilty about everything, and feel like working harder, and you know, all of this stuff that's very
You're on to me.
insidious. It's very
Yes.
insidious. So I think I'm understanding, you know, as a boyfriend of mine used to say, I'm picking up what you're laying down, you know.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. Yeah.
I
So
get it.
we'll talk about, if we make it to the all the way through the slides,
Mhm.
what I'm teaching here is a kind of skepticism, right?
About
And I have to go really, really slow, right? This is not a one-shot deal. Like I was hoping to not get as deep as we've gotten, just because this pokes at things that are deeply held inside of us, right? Like we'll talk about it in a little bit if we get to it. It's called an assumed truth, right? And every time I get close to poking at someone's assumed truths, they'll fight back, right? You don't understand, Hannah. This is the only way I've ever gotten anything done, is to make myself feel like shit. Like, I know, honey.
Right, and but
I know.
it's
I know.
not necessarily the only way to get things done, just the only way they know how to do it.
That's the skepticism that I'm bringing into this. And that's why we're talking right now about we're breaking down slowly, like what it's supposed to be doing for us. This is your sales pitch, bro. And what we'll talk about next is, of course, like, what are the actual outcomes? Like, would I actually buy this product, right? Like, these are the actual outcomes, and you told me it was going to do this for me. Why do we keep using this tool? And that and like you said, the only reason is it's the only tool we've been given, right? Like my parents chucking me in the car, they did not have any other tools to deal with a 4-year-old me, which is a hot mess. I'm not going to lie. I think things have mellowed over the last 50 years, but like 4-year-old Hannah was kind of a psychopath. So that's important to recognize. Like for a long time in my early adulthood, I was resentful of that until I became a parent. I was like, oh, they don't have any tools. I don't have any tools. Like, okay, I get it now. I understand. Right. So if we build more tools for ourselves, and the two ones that I've already that I've already teased are the ability to trust ourselves, which is just resilience, and the ability to observe our own behavior without judgment. That's it. Once we have those two things, we can build our own tools, and we don't need things like restriction. We haven't talked about it much, but another one that goes right along hand in hand with restriction is shame, judgment, regret, remorse. I'm sure that Jack could probably talk about like that kind of like, that's also, that is hand in hand, comes right along with restriction, is because any attempts at restriction that we have come along with failure, which proves to us, once again, that what? We can't be trusted, that we're garbage.
So,
Right.
so can I want to just throw something else out there real quick.
Okay.
Because I know you want to
Okay.
get started again, but so I'm thinking back to the silliest thing that I could do, silly, okay, but
Uh-huh.
it's turning out not to be silly. So like, in order to handle all of the stress that I've got going on in my life lately,
Uh-huh.
you know, rather than reading, you know, more sort of like esoteric, like intellectual stuff, I've gone back to reading like Regency romance novels because I
Nice.
pure
Yep.
escapism, right? But what's cool
Yep.
about them now is that there's more of a feminist bent to them.
Mm.
And
It certainly is,
so,
yeah.
and so they are, you know, I'm learning a lot about restrictions and norms that were forced on women 200 years ago, you know, that are
2,000 years, thousands and thousands of years. Yeah.
well, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is even 200 years ago, okay? That, and like there's this one character in one of the novels that I'm reading right now who supposed to be in mourning, right? And so she's in mourning because her husband died, and so she's supposed to be completely veiled. I don't know if you guys have ever seen those mourning veils, you know, they're completely all black. Your face is not allowed to be shown. You're completely shrouded for a year, okay? And then another 6 months after that, I think you can reveal a little bit. And then another 3 months after that, you can reveal a little bit more. And another character is trying to tell her, why are you doing this? You know, but it's so ingrained in her that that's the only way to show respect
Yes.
to the person who died, you know, that she's really struggling against that restriction that's been placed on her
Yes.
that is really meaningless, you know. And that's what I find interesting about going back and reading novels like that, is because it kind of helps me understand sort of like this ingrained expectation that women have of themselves, and even that men have of themselves as well,
Of
in terms of
course.
chivalry and all this other stuff, you know. And
It's like
so
that man. Yeah.
exactly. And I find that fascinating, because I think that all of that kind of plays into a lot of society's norms even now, you know.
I totally agree. And I'm here to pluck them in the throat a little bit. Just a little bit. What I do is I pluck them in the throat, I run away, I come back later. How you doing? You okay? Pluck them in the throat, come back again later. We were over the break, we were talking about like, there's deeper meaning to all of this. Like, this is touching for lots and lots of people. When we start talking about restriction, they can see it on the surface that this hurts and this sucks and I'm not doing this right? We can all kind of get that. But as we get deeper and deeper into the meaning, like people drawing value from this, like, if I can't do something as simple as restrict my diet, I must be a garbage person. And we didn't get that messaging from ourselves. We repeat it, right? We got this from the outside world. This is all around us, especially in the society. And that is something that this is definitely flying contrary to. And that's why, if you felt some rebellion and resentment to me as I've been talking, that's normal, right? Like, because we are touching close to something that is pretty darn, that has been sold to us as the only way to get things done. And it looks very, very simple, right? It looks like everybody else has their shit together. Looks like everybody else is restricting themselves perfectly well. They're not, right? But that's what it looks like to us. So we're not going to go, we've gotten deep. So let's go back up a little bit. So we have 25 minutes left in the actual session. So I'm at an impasse here, whether we keep going with the slides, because we're not going to make it very far. And what I'd like to do is stop 10 minutes early for question and answer and for the quiz. and that kind of a thing. But I can stay as late as you guys want. I can stay till 4 o'clock Pacific time. So we have unlimited time. So I'm going to put this to a vote. Do we want to go back to the slides and kind of carry on? Or do we want to stay in discussion like we are right now and just let this conversation just go where it's going to want to go? So go ahead and vote in chat if you want. You can say discussion or slides. See how I'm giving choice right now? Slides, slides. Slides is winning. Okay, that's lots of slides. Cool, thank you guys for voting. Okay, so we've got our sales pitch, right? Here, let's see how well I predicted. Oops, I'm messing up Zoom. Let's see how I did it. This is my prediction of what people might say. It's available. We've heard and had it reinforced thousands of times that this is the tool for getting where we want, and that judgment is everywhere, as we've discussed. It looks like everybody else is doing it. Restriction, it tells us it's the only way to keep us motivated, on track, focused. Della used the word structure, rules, limitations. Yeah, it does occasionally work, inconsistently and temporarily. We are told it is the quote unquote right way to do things. Why wouldn't we want to do things the right way? And it feels like we're doing something. This is called action bias. That's what my sign is talking about. It feels like we're doing something, anything, right? It feels like work. And what is restriction trying to protect us from? Laziness, temptations, distractions. Someone said ourselves. Yes. Being a bad person, parent, whatever. Anything else we can think that it's protecting us from? Trying to protect us from?
Failure.
Failure. Yeah, oh, that's a good one, because that's what it gives us, actually. So we're not going to go to breakouts again, just because I want to be respectful of everybody's time. But what are the actual outcomes of using restrictions? So we are evaluating use restriction as a strategy, not if you are doing it right, right? So that's something we kind of touched on a little bit ago. We are evaluating restriction as a tool, not whether you're restricting yourself hard enough or fast enough or long enough. Too much freedom. Stephanie, can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I actually am starting to feel like Maria, maybe I'm not totally understanding restriction. In my mind, I am equating it to self-hate right now.
That's actually a really good link. Yep, fantastic, good job.
Yeah, thank you. But that's not
Yeah,
so.
they're best. They're
active.
absolutely BFFs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, are you saying that an actual outcome of restriction and its best friend, self-hate?
Yeah, because if we love ourselves, we want ourselves to be free and feel good, and have, find meaning in all the positive things. So it's easier to control oneself if if we keep ourselves unhappy. So too much freedom would be snacking on the wrong snacks.
So let me frame the question a different way. So picture in your head someone who's restricts themselves a lot, right? So they've got the little restriction demon going, and they restrict. What would be some outcomes that that person would have? Are you saying that that person would have too much freedom, or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor it. It is a little free association. So if you rephrase the question that way, I would, what the person would gain is in their little metric, in their, little dashboard that they probably have of all the goals that they set, they would accumulate points, restriction points.
Interesting. Oh, that's fascinating. You got a little scorekeeping going on. Yeah. I like that. Julie says too much pressure. We've already talked about we talked about pressure and the consent continuum. Other things that happen is the rebellion and resentment, or eventually we just act out. What else, guys?
Isolation, or taking it to the other end of like binging.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's rebellion. Yep. Yep. I don't care. We get into the fuck it some. Fuck it. It doesn't matter anyways. That's apathy, right? So we'll flip over, and that's also a kind of resentment. Like we'll flip over into like, it doesn't matter what I do. I can't trust myself anyway, so I'm just going to eat the whole cheesecake. I did actually eat a whole cheesecake one time. So here's my predictions for what I thought people might say. It is a setup for failure, right? When we're using restriction, it tells us, because we can't ever do it right enough. We get into some procrastination. We'll feel more out of control, and it reinforces over and over and over again, I can't be trusted, right? Okay, so yeah, I hear you. Okay, cool, Hannah, whatever. Hannah's been talking about this for a while. What the heck do we do instead? So we're probably only going to have time for the quick win tool, and then probably not make it to the big boy strategy, because I appreciate the diversion and the conversation. I honestly, I've never taught the same class twice. So this one little tool, this little game that I'm going to teach you, and then I want you go practice this, and then you teach it to somebody else. So there are 3 versions of you. There's the past you. I'm sure you know where this is going. There's the right now you, and can you guess who's last? I'm sure you can. Future you. So which version, okay, let me ask this question a better way. For most people, which version of themselves do they say is most at risk? That didn't go very well. Hold on one second. Past you, right now you, or future you. What do you think most people choose as the version of themselves that is most at risk? That is not getting any better. I don't know if I'm going to try that question again. All right, I'm just going to move on with the slides because I can't seem to answer that question. Most people will say that the future version of themselves is most at risk, and that is true. Future us is like driving and being the passenger in a car with a driver who's a terrible driver. You are all the way at risk. You have no control. That's what it's like to be any future version of ourselves. If you are talking to someone who says that the right now version of themselves is the most at risk, do not correct them. They are in crisis. That's what crisis does to us. Like think about the hyena, right? That is legitimately the right now hyena is in danger, right? But our brains in crisis expand and contract time so that this minute right now is all of time, right? So our brains have a hard time thinking about the future where we're in a crisis. So everything registers as pain for the right now version of myself. The right now version of ourselves is the one who is actually in control, who can actually do stuff. The future version of ourselves, of course, can't do anything yet. And then, of course, the past version of ourselves is not the boss of you. The past is important because it informs where we are, but it's actually not as important as people think. When I'm working with clients, I spend a lot of time talking on where you are and where you want to go, but not a bunch of time talking about where you've been. That's what therapy is for. There is no communication between us right now and our past selves. We can think in the past and say, oh, thank you, past Hannah, for doing that for me. But there really isn't a back and forth communication. You actually can communicate with future versions of yourself. You can actually do favors for future versions of yourself. And that's the tool we're talking about today. We spend a lot of time in service of the right now version of ourselves. Like we've got self-care, that's mostly for the right now version of ourselves. We've got procrastination, which is definitely in the right now version of in service of right now. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between those two things, right? I don't know whether I'm putting something off because I need some self-care, or because I'm procrastinating, or maybe this is a strategy. Maybe I need more resources, or a different insight or something, right? It's hard to tell the difference between self-care, procrastination, and strategy sometimes. And for the most part, because we live in the world that we do, we just tend to label it all as procrastination, which is not fair. So the idea behind this little game that I'm about to teach is that we're going to make the right now version of ourselves just ever so slightly uncomfortable. Again, we spend a lot of time in service of the right now version of ourselves, making ourselves more comfortable, because our right now version of ourselves are the only ones that can feel pain. As we make the right now versions of ourselves uncomfortable, we make the future version of ourselves happy. And we're going to do this intentionally. This game is called Second Wave Self-Care, and I think it should be in addition to all the other kind of self-care as well. So you're going to choose a task, and there's a couple requirements for this task. It must be annoying to the right now version of you, not painful, not punishment, just a little aggravating. Like if your internal toddler goes, I don't wanna, that's perfect. We want to annoy ourselves. Moving through the world looking for ways to annoy ourselves is not something we spend a bunch of time doing. It must be in service of a specific version of future you. And I encourage people to visualize. So if I'm washing one dish and I'm putting it away, I'm visualizing myself using that dish. Can you see like the beam of light coming down from the heavens? Clean dish, oh, right? So I'm telling myself a funny little story. I'm visualizing that kind of a thing. So visualizing myself using this in the future, or my life being easier in the future. And it needs to be small, small, small. I'm not kidding. I'm not messing around. Human beings go way too big. We need to go small. So that's why I'm saying wash one dish, back the car in, prep the coffee, right? Like change one pillowcase, right? This small, small, small. I had a lady once who said, I got to this point, she goes, I could quit smoking. That would be in service of the future version of myself. I was like, absolutely not. No. Not, don't try to quit smoking, please. I said, how about putting off a cigarette by 10 minutes, right? You can visualize yourself in 10 minutes really enjoying the cigarette, or you can envision yourself putting off another one. That was a little harder one, but small, 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 small. Because this is a game and we're keeping the tasks small, we make the risk small too. So like, who cares if I don't wash one more dish? Are there actually any stakes to this? No, there are not. But if we make the tasks too big, the potential for failure gets too big too. So start with tomorrow morning, not a year from now. If I asked you, what is 3 things that you could do that would make your life easier tomorrow morning, you could probably come up with 3 little things. If I asked you, I'd like you to think 10 years into the future, please. What is one thing that you can do today that would make your life easier in 10 years? That's not, our brains don't work that way. Our brains can think about the right now, our brains can think about the past, and our brains are not good at thinking about the future. One of the things that this game does is it practices something called future thought. Oh, go back. So this is the most important thing. Once you complete this task, so let's say I've backed my car in. It annoyed me to back the car in, and the whole time I back the car in, I'm going, I don't want to back the car in. I back the car in, and then I'm going to ask myself the most important question. Did I die? I love the laughs I get from that one. This is absolutely critical because our brains are telling us, remember the little threat detecting, survival obsessed brain in the back of the hyena's head, in the back of your head? Always, always, always this brain is telling us that any change is going to kill us. I have actual anxiety, so my brain does this all of the time. But our brains are, even normally functioning brains, have this kind of like this little assessment tool going on. Is this going to kill us? Is this going to kill us? Yes, all the time. This pokes at that and sort of teaches it how to assess actual threat. So I back in the car and I say, okay, that sucked. Did I die? And my brain goes, no, right? So we're teaching that calibration. We're bringing down and over time, backing in the car is not not annoying anymore. So I need to find another thing. And then I ask again, did I die? So yeah, here's some other ideas. Doing one dish, back and parking is my favorite, prepping coffee, that kind of thing. Future thoughts. We're probably going to close on this. If you could take better care of future you, and you can ask these questions, like after you teach this, you could ask this question. By the way, kids are rock stars at this game. They get real weird with stuff, but they also try to go too big. If you could take better care of your future yourself, how would that affect your financial well-being? Would you even need restriction as much? Because what do you think happens as you make future you happier and easier? Do you even need restriction anymore? Do you need procrastination anymore? This game is sort of one of my favorite things and one of the first things that I teach, because it teaches us to trust ourselves. Look, you survived backing in the car. Look at you. Right? It teaches us to think about the future, even if it's really small and really close in time, which it should be. It teaches us that there are other ways to do things besides forcing or restricting ourselves. And it's super, super simple. Seriously, when I began this tool, because I'm the first client, I'm the worst client. This tool, I just did 3 a day. And procrastination for me absolutely stopped, just stopped. Because I didn't have to, right? Oh, I just now have a magically clean towel. Now, one of the better things about this is it gets us moving through the world looking for ways to make ourselves uncomfortable. That teaches resilience, right? That toughens us up a little bit. One of the early things I did, and it does not really in service of anybody, of any future version of anything, but just to build resilience, taking a slightly colder shower, right? Doing something you just is a little bit uncomfortable. Moving through the world this way, I think, is probably one of the better ways to teach people that they can survive. So let's pause. Oh, geez, don't do that. Don't look at all my tabs. I'm going to put some stuff into chat. So next month we are talking about 5 mental shortcuts. So these are logical fallacies, cognitive biases that are undermining financial well-being. It's kind of a continuation of what we saw today. I'll put the sign up for that here in just a minute. What is that? That is the quiz. If you want a certificate of completion, you can do that. This one, the second one, is the exit slip. Please fill out the exit slip. It helps me develop. So like if there's something you absolutely didn't understand and didn't feel comfortable sharing with the group, let me know here. And then the last one is the sign up for class next month. And come on. Okay, so first one is the quiz. Second one is the exit slip. Third one is sign up for next month. We're just about at time. And so I like to usually leave as much time as you want for discussion, question and answer. Now is a great time. If there's something that you need clarification on, please ask. If there's something, was there a point at which